Hello everyone. On today's class, we are going to learn about transtibial bandaging. Now let's learn how to do transfemoral bandaging. So, as we have discussed that transfemoral bandaging is usually done in side lying position for better control of the residual limb. Um, in side lying position, the hip is usually placed in neutral or slightly extended position. Since we're using two 6 inches and one 4-inch bandage, initially we'll start with the 6-inch bandages and we'll end up the bandaging with the 4-inch bandage. So let's begin with the bandaging of transfemoral residual limb. So usually we'll start the bandaging from the medial aspect of the residual limb. So as you can check out in the first diagram, we are starting over the medial aspect of the groin area, right? So we'll start from here and then we'll proceed in a diagonal manner in the anterior aspect towards the distal end of the residual limb. Okay, from there we are going to bring it toward the other end and then make a diagonal pattern and reach the iliac crest. Okay, so this is how we are going to end the first turn. Next, from the posterior aspect of the iliac crest, the bandage is wrapped around the hip. So as you can see in the second diagram, from the iliac crest it's taken around the hip. So like this, okay, fine. Then after this turn, we are going to take another turn around the groin in the proximal aspect. So you can see here, this is the turn we are taking. So this is above the previous turn, right? So we are taking the turn in the proximal aspect itself. We are not going to the distal aspect. Then after this again we are going to take a turn around the hip. So this is how we are going to end the first bandage. Okay, so next we are going to start with the second bandage. So as you can see, it's depicted here in a darker pinkish color. So what we are going to do is, the proximal bandage we are going to start a bit lateral to the groin. Okay, so the main function of this second bandage is to cover any area that is left behind in the proximal part of the residual limb during the first wrapping. So as you can see in the third diagram, can you see here a bit of this part is left behind. So what the second bandage is going to do is going to cover any area this left behind in the proximal part only, okay, not over the distal area. Fine, so we can see the same thing over the fourth diagram. It's brought back here, then following the figure of 8, it's wrapped around the hip and again brought here and brought it up. Okay, then in the sixth also again above the previous bandage, right? So all the turns are taken in the proximal area, okay, not in the distal area. So this is how we are going to end with the second bandage. Next we'll start with the 4-inch bandage. This bandage is generally started more laterally than the Next we'll start with the 4-inch bandage. This bandage is generally started laterally. So as you can see in the 7th diagram, so this is the third bandage, right? So we are starting it from the lateral part of the residual limb, okay? And it's not this third bandage, we are not going to anchor around the hip. We are only going to cover the medial and the lateral aspect. The main aim of this 4-inch bandage actually is to exert a greater amount of pressure over the medial and the distal areas of the residual limb. So you can see in diagram 8 and 9, this 4-inch bandage is following the figure of 8 pattern and has covered all the parts of the distal and the middle area. However, it's not used over the hip. Okay, so this is how we are going to complete the transfemoral bandaging. So let's revise it very quickly. So from the first diagram, medial to lateral, and then around the hip, and again from medial to lateral, then again around the hip. Then we'll go for the second bandage. In the second bandage, we are going from slightly medial, then again medial to lateral, around the hip, medial to lateral, around the hip. Then from the 7 diagram, we are going to start with the third bandage. We are going to start from lateral to medial. Okay, and then we are going to cover in figure of 8 pattern all the medial and distal end, and that's how we are going to complete the transfemoral bandaging. Thank you everyone.